ABC scrapped an entire season of The Bachelorette 3 days before it was supposed to premiere. Fully filmed, fully edited, fully promoted, she walked a red carpet 1 week ago and then they pulled it, citing a video that showed conduct they already knew about when they signed her. So today we're going to figure out who actually has a legal case here because it might not be who you think, and it's definitely more than one person. Welcome back to Exhibit A List, where pop culture gets cross examined. I'm your host, Jasmine Wegg. I'm a lawyer and I break down the contracts, power dynamics, and legal realities behind the stories everyone is talking about. Just a quick reminder, you can find me on Instagram, Jasmine Wegg, ESQ, and the podcast, Exhibit A List Pod. My TikTok is Jazz the Lawyer. Follow, rate, review this podcast, share this episode and the podcast with someone who needs a lawyer bestie. Okay, today we are doing a full deep dive on one story because it needs attention. There's multiple potential defendants and a situation that has more legal moving parts than any single episode I've done. We're talking about Taylor Frankie Paul, the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives star, the TikTok star, the woman ABC made their Bachelorette, and the woman ABC has just dropped 3 days before her premiere after a video surfaced of conduct they already knew had happened. We're going to go through the whole thing, the 2023 arrest, the plea deal, and I need to even explain what a plea in abeyance actually is because every outlet is getting this wrong. The casting, the Disney Hulu conflict of interest that nobody's talking about loudly enough, the Deux Moi intel that changes everything about who might be suing whom, the money, because there's a lot of it on the table, and the live contestants who are now reportedly considering a lawsuit of their own. This one has layers, so let's get into it. So, who is Taylor Frankie Paul? If you are somehow not familiar, Taylor Frankie Paul is a Utah based influencer who rose to fame as part of Mom Talk, which is a community of young Mormon mothers on TikTok. She had over 6 million TikTok followers and built a life online, documenting her marriage, her family, and her faith and community. In 2022, she actually went massively viral. She confessed to something that was very scandalous at the time, that she and her then husband, Tate Paul, had been involved in what she had called soft swinging with other couples in their friend group. That confession blew up Mom Talk, implicated friends without naming them, and ended her marriage publicly in real time. Enter Dakota Mortensen. They started dating shortly after the split. The relationship was intense and volatile from the beginning, and we saw a lot of it play out on TikTok. They broke up, they got back together. In February of 2023, they had an altercation that resulted in Taylor's arrest. This is important because this is what's coming into play now, along with some new stuff. She was charged with felony aggravated assault, 2 counts of domestic violence in the presence of a child abuse, and criminal mischief after she threw metal bar stools and chairs at Dakota while her then 5-year-old daughter was in the room. A police officer confirmed that the child was struck by one of those stools. And then in September 2024, Hulu premiered a show called The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. The very first episode ends with body camera footage of Taylor being arrested outside her home. The show built the entire season 1 narrative around that arrest and its fallout. It was Hulu's most watched unscripted premiere of 2024. I'm going to come back to that Hulu detail because it is very important. Almost every outlet covering this story is describing Taylor's legal situation incorrectly. So let me break it down properly because the details matter enormously for everything that follows. So here's what she was charged with: 1 count of felony aggravated assault, 2 counts of felony domestic violence in the presence of a child causing injury, 1 count of misdemeanor child abuse, 1 count of misdemeanor criminal mischief. Here's what she pleaded to. So in August 2023, Taylor pled guilty to 1 count of third-degree felony aggravated assault. The other 4 charges were dismissed with prejudice. With prejudice means that they're out, that they are not going to be brought again. Her plea was held in abeyance for 3 years. So what is a plea in abeyance? A plea in abeyance is not a conviction. And it's also not a dismissal. It's something in between. So she pled guilty. The court held the plea, put it on pause, and does not enter a conviction immediately. Instead, you are placed on conditions. In Taylor's case, she had to complete a substance abuse evaluation, complete a domestic violence evaluation, complete recommended treatment, if any, and not violate any major laws. If a person successfully completes the conditions over the period, then the plea is withdrawn. Then the charge is either dismissed or reduced. So, in other words, they wouldn't necessarily have the felony anymore, even though they pled guilty to the felony because it's in abeyance. So, there are certain conditions that they could satisfy and then get that felony off. Maybe it's reduced or maybe it's dismissed altogether. And this is a way that the person's record could stay clean. However, if you violate any of those conditions, the guilty plea gets entered. So that plea of guilty to felony will be entered and you'll be convicted. So Taylor's 3-year probation runs out in August 2026. As of today, she does not have a conviction on her record from the 2023 incident. But here's where things get legally precarious. In February 2026, while she was still on probation, a new domestic assault investigation was opened involving Taylor and Dakota. The Draper City Police confirmed it is an open investigation with allegations made in both directions, meaning they're both alleging, Taylor and Dakota are both alleging against each other assault and other things. If Taylor is found to have committed another domestic violence offense while on this probation period, then that is a potential probation violation. That 2023 guilty plea could be entered. She could be convicted on the original third-degree felony. Now, bringing us to the present, on March 19, 2026, TMZ published footage from the 2023 incident. This footage, many say they've seen in 2023. It was leaked on TikTok and other places on the internet. But in that video, Dakota can be seen recording on his phone as Taylor yells at him, puts him in a headlock, throws metal bar stools at him. Now, we don't know what went on before he hit record. We don't know what he was doing to her, saying to her. We only get this snapshot of her toward him, which may be a reaction. And it's a little bit unfair that that's all we see because we don't know what he, as the man, has done in this situation. But from our view, we see her and being aggressive toward him physically. Now, her daughter can be heard in this video crying in the background. Dakota can be heard saying, "Look, this is called physical abuse." Her daughter is present as Taylor continuously throwing objects. Taylor's team, however, has said that this video was part of a destructive campaign to harm her, that it omits context, as I was just alluding to, and that she has been suffering from mental and physical abuse for years. So Dakota has categorically denied all of these claims, and he said that he is focused on their son's safety. They share a son, Ever. Dakota was granted temporary custody of their 2-year-old son, Ever, until a hearing on April 7th. We don't know the full picture of what this relationship looked like behind closed doors. What we do know, though, is that Taylor herself said when she went on the Vile Files podcast in September 2024 that she had been drinking that night, that she was so gone, I don't care, and that she threw another chair after being told her daughter was present. What I am going to do is analyze the legal situation, and the most legally interesting part of the story is not what Taylor did. It's what ABC did. Taylor was announced as the lead of Bachelorette Season 22 in September 2025. First Bachelorette in franchise history who has never appeared on The Bachelor. ABC chose her, cherry-picked her, specifically to revitalize a show that had been struggling with ratings. Hold that in your mind while I walk you through this next part. ABC does not own The Bachelorette. The show is produced by Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers distributes it internationally. ABC licenses it. So when ABC canceled the season, they did not just lose ad revenue, they're on the hook for license fees to Warner Brothers, marketing dollars already spent, and a cascade of contractual obligations they triggered with that cancellation. Industry sources report that ABC could be out tens of millions of dollars if this season never airs. Now, here's the fact that everyone is dancing around and nobody is saying directly enough. Hulu and ABC are both owned by Disney. That's the same parent company. Disney owns the streaming platform that built an entire show around Taylor's 2023 arrest and called it their most watched unscripted premiere of the year. And Disney's broadcast network then cast Taylor as the Bachelorette. And when the video of that same circumstances leading to her arrest surfaced, they said they were acting in light of newly released footage. Newly released. The conduct that it showed was not new. The arrest was not new. The plea was not new. The probation was not new. It was all documented. It was all public. It was all on their own streaming platform. Two emails are circulating this week through Deux Moi that tell competing stories, and I want to read you both because this is exactly the kind of inside information that reveals how these situations actually work. Email 1 had a subject line, Bachelorette mess. The source writes, she is allegedly layering up after ABC Disney blames that resurfaced video from her 2023 incident, which she already pleaded guilty to, for canceling her Bachelorette season, even though they already knew about it when they cast her. From what I'm hearing, there's nothing in that video that isn't already in the public arrest records. So it's kind of hard to argue that this is some new information. It sounds more like the video just gave them an easy out. And email 2, the subject line is wilted roses. A different source writes, ABC has already been reviewing contracts to see if TFP, Taylor Frankie Paul, can be sued for the spoiled Bachelorette season. She might have some big money to pay ABC if they scrap her season. So we have two competing legal theories from two different industry insiders, supposedly. These are supposed sources that Deux Moi is reporting. Taylor suing ABC or ABC going after Taylor, allegedly. Let me tell you my thoughts on these. So, theory 1 is Taylor sues ABC. Taylor's team has said that she's exploring all her legal options. So, here's what these options actually could look like. Breach of contract. Taylor had a contract. Based on what other bachelorettes have been paid and the fact that ABC actively recruited her from outside the franchise, she was likely earning upwards of $250,000 for the season. If ABC cancels without legal justification, meaning if they cannot successfully invoke the morality clause, they owe her that money regardless of whether the season airs. Now, there's the morality clause argument, Taylor's version. Morality clauses are typically built into contracts to allow a network to terminate an agreement if talent engages in conduct after signing that damages the brand. The key phrase here is after signing. According to that Deux Moi source, it was put quite clearly that there is a morality clause in her contract, but it usually applies to behavior after signing or something from the past that wasn't disclosed, neither of which really applies here since ABC knew about the 2023 situation and cast her anyway. This is the heart of the waiver argument. If you know about something, sign the contract anyway, and then try to use that same thing to get out of the contract later, you may have waived your right to invoke it. So ABC might have waived their right to invoke this morality clause if they knew about the arrest and everything tied to it. You cannot turn a blind eye to something and then be surprised by it when it becomes inconvenient. And theory 2 is that ABC sues Taylor. An attorney reported to Page 6 that morality clauses are very broad and typically state that the person cannot do anything to reflect negatively on the company. That attorney believed that Taylor's contract would include one and that it likely covers this situation, meaning not only might Taylor not get paid, she might have to return money that she already received. Now, here's the thing, they cited that footage that came out from 2023, but what about the new charges from 2026? If they point to that as the reason, maybe that is sufficient as her having breached the contract and broken her requirement to not do anything that makes the show look bad. The contract might also have liquidated damages provisions, which is a predetermined damages amount or an indemnification clause, all these things that would require her to cover ABC's losses. So here's my legal opinion. The morality clause argument is much weaker for ABC than it looks on paper because of the timing and the knowledge problem. You really can't invoke a clause based on conduct if you knew about that when you signed the contract. It's not how contract law works. If a morality clause applies to pre existing disclosed conduct that the network chooses to overlook in exchange for Taylor's massive platform, a court is going to have serious questions about whether that clause was effectively waived. And then there's another theory, whether the contestants will sue ABC. This is a brand new one, and it's actually the most legally interesting development of the week. TMZ is reporting that 5 contestants who filmed Taylor's season are now considering legal options against ABC and Warner Bros. So they argue that these men put their lives on hold, some quit their jobs, others gave up financial opportunities in exchange for the promise of pop culture visibility that never materialized. Which is ironic because supposedly they're going on the show to find love, and for them to then sue because they didn't get the fame they were hoping for really strikes a chord with me. Supposedly, these guys' lawyers are exploring whether the option created an unsafe working environment by allowing someone with a documented history of violence to interact with contestants in an intimate setting. This is interesting because if the network knew, and the evidence strongly suggests that they did know, that Taylor had pleaded guilty to aggravated assault and domestic violence, and then they went and placed men in a house with her for weeks of intimate filming, then that's a duty of care question. They had information that arguably should have triggered additional precautions. Whether those precautions were taken is going to be a very interesting question if these cases ever get brought. There is a lot of money at stake here. ABC is facing tens of millions of dollars in losses from the cancellation. But on Taylor's end, she's also losing money. Cinnabon was the first brand to have already cut ties with her, terminating its collaboration with both The Bachelorette and The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. And then the actual season 5 Secret Life of Mormon Wives has been put on hold due to what's going on. The cast has been publicly distancing themselves, and Taylor's name has been scrubbed from ABC's website and media center. And here is one piece of genuinely interesting but unconfirmed intel. Industry sources suggest that the season is not necessarily dead forever. Some believe that Taylor's Bachelorette season will eventually air, possibly on Hulu, possibly in ABC's summer schedule, after a period of public accountability from Taylor. In other words, they let her ride the redemption train, apologize, look contrite, and then they show the show and they don't look like the bad guys for supporting someone who may be involved in abuse. The paradox of reality TV is that the public already expects these shows to be messy. This might not be the death sentence for the season that it looks like right now. If you look on TikTok comments and Instagram, a lot of people are on Taylor's side because a lot of people feel Dakota is very manipulative. A lot of people feel that you don't get to see all of the manipulation that he's doing behind the scenes and probably the psychological and maybe other types of abuse that he might have put her through that led her to behave the way she behaved. And they also feel that his release of the video to TMZ just days before she's supposed to be airing her new season of Bachelorette was so calculated and devious. People are saying, air the show. We are a generation who watch the Jersey Shore. We can handle this. And that public sentiment might be what ABC and Hulu need to feel confident to show the show without the backlash. Because ultimately, is my belief that the fear that is making them cancel the season is public backlash. If the season eventually airs, the legal calculus changes significantly. A canceled season is one set of legal claims. A delayed season that eventually airs is a completely different situation for everyone involved, probably much better financially for everyone. Ultimately, Taylor Frankie Paul is 31 years old. She became famous by oversharing her life on the internet. Everything, the swinging confession, the arrest, the pregnancy, the postpartum struggle, the relationship chaos, all of it played out publicly because she made it public. And then, because the industry built shows around it, and they called that entertainment. Hulu put her arrest in episode 1 of season 1, and they nominated the show for an Emmy. Disney called her a breakout star and cast her as the Bachelorette. And then Disney called the video surrounding that night newly surfaced information that made them unable to proceed. The institution that profited from her chaos is the one distancing itself from her. And she is left holding every consequence, while the network, the streaming platform, and the production companies figure out how to minimize their losses and protect their brands. I am not saying that what is on that video is okay. It is not okay. A child was present and a child may have been hurt, and that's serious. I am saying that we should be clear eyed about who made money from Taylor Frankie Paul's most difficult moments and who is acting surprised right now. The problem is that we are being asked to feel one thing at a time about a situation that requires us to feel several things at once. Taylor deserved a chance, and ABC was reckless. Both at the same time. A 5-year-old being in the room when chairs get thrown is serious, and ABC knew the relevant facts when they signed her. Both at the same time. All right, guys, that's it for this week's deep dive on Exhibit A List. We went through the whole TFP situation, the legal meaning of her plea deal, the Disney Hulu conflict of interest that nobody else is naming, the morality clause argument from both sides, the contestants who are now considering their own lawsuit, and what the money actually looks like for everyone involved. This story is still developing. The April 7th custody hearing is coming up. The investigation is ongoing. Taylor's legal team is active, and I will be watching every filing and update. If this episode gave you something to think about, follow the podcast at Exhibit A List Pod on Instagram, and find me on Instagram, Jasmine Weg ESQ, and on TikTok at Jazz the Lawyer. I would love it if you follow the podcast, rate, review, share it with a friend. You can listen to me on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and I will see you next time on Exhibit A List. Stay curious.